Imagine this, all right? You're on a plane,
Mhm.
and your 5-year-old is just, you know, having a meltdown, crying. Well, settle down. And you see a flight attendant, and you think, okay, maybe she can help for a sec, just to give you a breather.
Yeah, I can see that, totally.
But then, when you get your kid back, her gold necklace is gone. Poof, vanished.
Oh, wow.
And that is what Priyanka Mukherjee, the wife of an ISRO scientist, says happened to her on an IndiGo flight, Trivandrum to Bengaluru, April 1st.
That's awful. I mean, talk about a stressful situation, right? On a plane with a kid and then this.
Exactly. And it really makes you think, doesn't it, about how safe are we really when we fly? What about our stuff? I mean, we trust these airlines, we trust the people working on those flights, but then something like this happens and it's like,
It shakes things up a bit. You start questioning things.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what we're diving into today, this whole incident, the fallout, what it means for, passenger trust,
Yeah.
airline accountability, all of that.
Yeah, there are a lot of layers to unpack here for sure. Like, what happens next? Is there an investigation?
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole police investigation going on right now. And, this whole thing, it's more than just a missing necklace. It brings up these bigger questions about, like, the safety nets we have in place when we travel.
Yeah.
Or maybe the ones we don't have.
Right, because you assume there are certain safeguards, especially in a controlled environment like an airplane.
Totally. So let's get into it, okay? We're drawing from news reports on the incident itself, and then we're going to look at some stuff on airline ethics and compliance. The policies they have in place and all that.
Okay, sounds good. Let's lay it all out.
So Priyanka, she was traveling with her 2 daughters, 5 and 2 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were on their way to Kolkata, had a connecting flight in Bengaluru.
Okay.
Now, this detail about her husband being an ISRO scientist, I mean, it might seem like a small thing, but it kind of adds another layer to this whole story, doesn't it? Well, because it shows that this kind of thing, this whole missing necklace situation, it can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who you are, what your background is.
That's a good point. It kind of makes it hit closer to home for people.
Yeah, exactly. So according to Priyanka, her 5-year-old daughter, she was just being a typical 5-year-old on a plane, restless, crying.
I can only imagine. Flying can be tough on kids.
And that's when Priyanka says she handed her daughter to a flight attendant. Just for a moment,
Yeah,
hoping maybe she could calm her down a bit.
right. Just to get a little help, a little break.
Exactly. But then, when she got her daughter back, the necklace was gone. And they've named the flight attendant involved as Aditi Ashwini Sharma.
Wow. So what happened next? I mean, did Priyanka confront the flight attendant right then?
She did. She filed a complaint with the police at the airport in Bengaluru, the Kempegowda International Airport, KIA, and they registered an FIR, which basically means a formal investigation is underway.
Okay, so the wheels are in motion at least.
Yeah, but Priyanka has said that even getting to that point, even filing the report, was a hassle.
Oh, really? Like how so?
Well, she's claimed that the airline, they weren't very helpful at first. Like, she says they wouldn't even give her a photo of the flight attendant.
Really? That's strange. You would think they'd want to cooperate,
I
right?
did think. And to make matters worse, the accused flight attendant, Aditi Ashwini Sharma, she's denied everything. Says she didn't take anything.
So it's her word against Priyanka's at this point.
Pretty much. And here's another wrinkle. Apparently there's no CCTV footage from inside the cabin itself.
Wait, no cameras inside the cabin?
Nope. Which makes it even harder to figure out what really happened, You've got cameras everywhere else in the airport, even in other parts of the plane, but not inside the cabin where the passengers are.
That is strange. I mean, you'd think that would be a priority for security reasons. Why wouldn't they have cameras there?
Right. It's a good question. Maybe it's a cost thing. Maybe privacy concerns. I don't know. Something to think about, though.
Yeah, definitely. It makes you wonder what kind of evidence they're going to be able to gather without that footage.
Well, Priyanka, she was smart. She had a video on her phone that she took earlier during the flight.
Yeah.
And in the video, her daughter's clearly wearing the necklace. They were having cake, it was all happy and stuff.
Ah, so there's proof that the necklace was there at the beginning of the flight? At least that?
Yep. It's not definitive proof, but it definitely helps her case. And you can tell that Priyanka and her family, they're not taking this lightly. Her husband, the ISRO scientist, he actually flew from Trivandrum to Bengaluru to be with them. They missed their connecting flight to Kolkata because of all this and ended up spending the night at the airport.
Oh man, that's adding insult to injury. Not only the theft, but now they're stranded too.
Yeah, it's a whole ordeal. So let's talk about the airline now, IndiGo. They did release a statement, the typical PR kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, what did they say? The usual, we're aware and taking it seriously?
Pretty much. They said they know about the situation, taking it very seriously, yada, 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 full cooperation with the authorities, blah, blah, blah.
Standard response. But, what else can they really say at this point?
Right. But you have to wonder if it's enough. I mean, this whole thing, it's causing a lot of anxiety among flyers, especially parents. You see something like this and you start thinking, what if that was my kid?
Totally. It just erodes that sense of trust you have when you travel, You're putting your faith, and often your kids, in the hands of these airlines.
Exactly. And it makes you question, how much do these airlines really prioritize our safety and security beyond just, the big stuff like terrorism or whatever?
Yeah, what about the smaller things, the everyday things that could still have a huge impact on someone's life?
Right. So this is where it gets interesting. IndiGo, they actually have this whole whistleblower policy thing. It's like a formal document where they say they're committed to ethical business, honesty, all that jazz.
Oh, interesting. So they've got a system in place for reporting stuff like this, like theft.
Yep. Which makes you wonder, right? If they have this policy, why did this even happen in the first place? Was it just ignored? Did someone not follow it? It's like a whole other mystery.
Yeah, good point. A policy is only as good as its enforcement, right?
Exactly. So let's break down this policy a bit. Okay, first of all, it applies to everyone, not just the people who work for IndiGo directly, but also vendors, contractors, anyone who does business with them.
Wow, so it's pretty wide-reaching.
Yeah, which makes sense, right? Because unethical behavior, it can happen anywhere, at any level.
Right, you want to cover all your bases.
Exactly. And the policy, it even gives specific examples of what you should report. Forgery, financial fraud, bribery, the big stuff, and of course, theft. That's the relevant one here.
Right, and I guess that makes it clear to everyone what's considered unacceptable behavior, no gray areas.
Right. But it's not just like venting about your boss or anything. It specifically says it doesn't cover personal grievances or being unhappy with your performance review. This is serious stuff.
Makes sense. You don't want the system bogged down with petty complaints. It needs to focus on the real deal.
Okay, so who oversees all this? They have something called the Ethics and Compliance Committee. And it's made up of all the bigwigs. The senior VP of HR, the CFO, the head of legal, all that.
Okay, so it's not just some random group. These are people with real authority.
Yep, which shows that, at least on paper, they take this stuff seriously.
Right. It's not just lip service.
And they make it pretty easy to report stuff, too.
Yeah.
They've got a toll-free hotline you can call 247, and it's in multiple languages. There's a website, you can email them, even a chatbot.
A chatbot? Seriously?
Yeah, it's 2025, man. Chatbots are everywhere. But they also have a regular old mailing address, if you prefer. And the important thing is, you can report anonymously.
That's good. Because sometimes people might be afraid to speak up, especially if they think there will be repercussions.
Exactly. But the policy does say they prefer it if you identify yourself, just because it helps with the investigation.
Right, I can see that.
And they're very clear that there will be no retaliation against whistleblowers. They even promise to keep everything confidential.
That's really important. People need to feel protected if they're going to come forward.
Totally. So the policy lays out exactly how a complaint is handled. They review it, they investigate, they interview people, and then they take action based on what they find.
It's all very structured, a clear process.
Yeah. But even with all of that, this still happened. So it makes you wonder, right, how effective are these systems really?
It's a good question. You have to wonder, are there gaps in the system? Are people not being trained properly? Are they just not taking it seriously enough?
Exactly. It makes you think about the airline industry as a whole. Background checks are a huge part of the hiring process. They're supposed to weed out anyone who might be a risk.
Right, but you have to wonder if those checks are thorough enough. Are they looking for the right things?
That's a good point. Because we're talking about, keeping passengers safe. And that means thinking about all kinds of risks, not just the obvious stuff.
Right, you don't want someone with a history of violence working on a plane, obviously. But what about someone with a history of theft? Should that be a red flag too?
It's a tough question. And it gets even more complicated when you think about the different levels of risk. Is stealing a necklace the same as, hijacking a plane?
Of course not. But both are breaches of trust, and both can undermine the safety and security of passengers.
Absolutely. And the airlines, they have to balance all of this, right? They need to make sure they're hiring people who are trustworthy, but they also need to be fair to applicants. It's a tricky balance.
It is. And it's not just about individual employees either. It's about the culture of the entire organization.
So true. If the culture is one where people feel like they can get away with stuff, then even the best policies in the world won't matter.
Exactly. It needs to be clear that ethical behavior is expected at all levels, from the CEO down to the baggage handlers.
Right. So let's talk about what these background checks actually look for. Okay, first of all, criminal history. That's a big one. And there are certain crimes that are automatic disqualifiers, like espionage, terrorism, murder, stuff like that.
Okay, that makes sense. You don't want anyone with a history of violence or terrorism working on a plane.
Exactly. But they also look at things like employment history, education, credit history, and they do drug testing. And for some positions, they even check your social media.
Social media, huh? That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a sign of the times, I guess.
Yeah.
They want to see if you're posting stuff that could reflect badly on the airline.
I can see that. In this day and age, your online presence can say a lot about you.
It's true. So the airlines, they're doing a lot to try to ensure our safety. But as we've seen with this whole IndiGo incident, things can still slip through the cracks.
Right. And it highlights the need for constant vigilance. We can't just assume that everything is fine because there are policies in place.
Exactly. We as passengers, we have a role to play too. We need to be aware, we need to ask questions, and we need to speak up if we see something that seems wrong.
I agree. We all have a responsibility to make sure that air travel is as safe and secure as possible.
Well said. So that's our deep dive for today. We've looked at this whole incident with the missing necklace, the airline's response, their whistleblower policy, the importance of background checks, and the whole culture of safety and security in the airline industry.
It's been a fascinating discussion. I think it's really important to understand all these different aspects so that we can be informed passengers and make smart choices when we travel.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to this question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do we balance trust with accountability? We want to believe that the airlines are doing everything they can to keep us safe, but we also need to be realistic and recognize that there are always going to be risks.
Right. And we need to be prepared to ask tough questions and hold the airlines accountable when things go wrong.
Absolutely. So if you're still with us, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful. If you did, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our future episodes. We've got a lot more great content coming your way.
And don't forget to leave a comment down below and let us know what you think about this incident. What are your thoughts on airline safety and security? We'd love to hear from you.
And hey, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button, join our community, and let's keep exploring together. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.